Concord 2? No, Concord 3, because Highguard came first. Somebody who calls themselves an enjoyer of video games is probably saying on the internet somewhere. Ladies and gentlemen, Bungie has almost flipped the narrative of Marathon following the couple years that it's been revealed to the public and the smaller playtests that have gone on over that time during the alpha and even some sponsored streams in between, where people otherwise didn't have very nice things to say about Marathon, even excluding the art theft controversy. So right out the gate, this game really didn't have much going for it. And now that reports have came out that they've legally settled whatever issues they were having with that artist on Twitter, and of course the recent ViDoc that dropped in December that showcased all the new changes, the visual overhaul, and some extra features that was going to be coming to Marathon. Since these things have been disclosed and people have seen the changes for themselves in the recent playtests and in the ViDoc footage, and now all the recent gameplay that we have after State of Play, we're getting a lot of information. We're getting a lot of eyes on the game now. People are starting to say things about Marathon that fully instill confidence in, I hope, the development team and the company, and of course us players, that the game will not be dead on arrival. And it is important to mention, like, okay, Bungie is climbing up this hill of redemption to give Marathon a new name, to give it a new leaf on life in the public reception of live service games, especially after the last 10 years of what they've pulled with Destiny 2. What exactly does that mean? Because the game is not out yet. The game comes out in 6 days. Well, just by taking a look at the competition, Arc Raiders is not slowing up whatsoever, and that game does offer quite a stark contrast and alternatives in comparison to some of the other extraction shooters out there. In fact, they don't even call themselves an extraction shooter, they call themselves an extraction adventure. And it is a game that is, I like to call it VR chat with guns. It's a very cooperative, naturally social, kind of open-ended game that is not so focused on quest progression, ARGs, story progression, meta progression systems in general. The skill tree is significantly worse than like how skills and whatnot are leveled up in Tarkov. Questing in itself is pretty insignificant to the overall progression of the game. Once you reach like the 70 or 80 hour mark, the quests just give you things that you basically already have, except for like, I don't know, a Berletta BP or something like that. And I think Embark realized that if they just leaned more into that social aspect of the game, this is something that they talked about in the Making of Arc Raiders documentary, then it was going to naturally create more memorable moments for players. And it has. The game still retaining a very significant amount of players, I assume even more on console, and the success at Embark Studios has been incredible to see as a day one finals player and as somebody who does also really enjoy Arc Raiders, but just looking for something a bit more serious, I guess. And here's where I'm at with Marathon. Now personally, I'm somebody who jumped on the hype train after watching the ViDoc. When I first caught on to the game, I was watching a sponsored stream from Tens, and you could tell by the look on his face, he didn't really give a shit about what he was seeing on his monitor. You could tell that by some or multiple degrees, the game was not really hitting on the cylinders that it needed to for it to be a big hit, or for it to even just retain some level of meaningful player base. And also by, you know, companies paying these streamers to play games they most likely are not going to play once they come out. They are gambling with those audiences to see if they are pleased with the results or not. And this is the alpha. I don't know why they're paying streamers to play a very unfinished game, but I don't know. I'm not in the marketing and PR position. Maybe they had something in mind doing that. But okay, we're going off into a bit of a tangent here. What does this hill of redemption really mean for Bungie? Well, it means one thing. At least the game is now starting to get a much better first impression ahead of the release, because it's coming up just in a little under, I guess, 2 weeks now. Those initial impressions they were getting from the alpha or from people who were already made aware of the game from the reveal trailer, or from just being a fan of Destiny, keeping up with whatever Bungie's doing. Even when the game releases in early March, it's still going to be the first time that a lot of people see Marathon. You know, a lot of people don't really care for the Game Awards or State of Play or some of the Xbox shows and all those things, because they're too busy with their real lives, and they come back and turn on their screens and they see whatever's in front of them. But with this also, and more importantly, means is that when the game is delivered in early March, it has to bang. There has to be no glaring bugs, glitches, or issues. The servers have to work. You know, maybe a login queue of a couple 10,000 is not too bad if we can get in a couple minutes. Whatever the case is, the game has to work. The people who are in, they shouldn't be having issues with quest progression or creating their runner builds or gun builds or whatever the case may be. It should be well optimized. They are using their own Tiger engine, so they're not, you know, dealing with the constraints or complications of using a UE4, UE5, whatever, you know, is going on with that. And ideally, if people are having fun playing what they're playing, then some of these things are not even that significant to begin with. People will put up with pretty glaring issues in a game if they just enjoy the game that they're playing. It's one thing for people to say a lot of good stuff about Marathon when the gameplay looks great and they haven't gotten their hands on it. It's a whole other thing for them to start playing the game and realize, wait, I actually don't enjoy this game as much as I thought I was. If they can retain a decent amount, it doesn't have to be most of those day one players, and quickly address player feedback. We know how Bungie is with player feedback. Then this game is well on its way to being a successful live service game. Past few years of Destiny's live service has suffered, and Sony has poured a good amount of money into this project. They are hoping that Marathon turns out to be at least a respectably good success. Doesn't have to be Arc Raiders big. Of course, this game is not really appealing to the friendly Hey Raider casuals that, you know, enjoy Arc Raiders, which is good. It's good to have options. But I think it's actually smart for Bungie to be making a bit more of a what seems to be competitive extraction shooter. We're not really sure yet, but that's what it's shaping up to be from what we've seen so far, because they're not really going to reach the casuals of Arc Raiders with the way that that game is. The polarizing art style and looking to have a bit deeper quest progression and guns being a bit more significant depending on how you build them, and the extra perks and dynamics that they bring to gunfights. I think the reason why Arc Raiders is so successful is because the game does not require you to think too much about the moment-to-moment gameplay. You can just drop into a raid, and for the most part, the most friction you will experience is trying to avoid Arc. So I think it's good Bungie can identify there's a possible demand here that hasn't been met. There's a lot of PvP players in Arc Raiders, you know, who just in some ways don't really feel like they fit in the game. Solo players, especially when they talk about, you know, bringing out gear, spawning in a couple minutes late, they want to go and fight somebody and they're just all friendlies. And of course they can still decide to fight them, but it's not bringing the kind of experience that you would want out of an extraction shooter. If your only option is to play squads, then for those of you who have played the game, you know exactly what that entails. Everybody's bringing out Venator, Renegades, bringing out 9, 12, 15 trigger nades. You're just going to sit across the room from each other and toss trigger nades. Not sure if you could tell by my tone, there is some personal biases that I have against Arc Raiders PvP. While the gunplay is very fun, the application of PvP gameplay in the game to me is just, I'm not going to get into that. To strike the balance between the extremely unforgiving, hyper realistic nature of Tarkov and the very casual, laid back experience that Arc Raiders provides, I think is what a lot of people are expecting Marathon to sit somewhere in between. But it should very well be its own thing. This is going to be an extraction shooter that's bringing abilities and build crafting into the scene. So something interesting, of course, they're going to have to balance in their own right. Granted, their, I guess, frames of reference is Apex Legends characters and a PvE game in Destiny. So if Bungie is able to capitalize on some of the weaknesses that Arc Raider has in terms of meta progression, questing, and other things of that sort, you know, ARG's story nature in terms of how the gameplay is tied into it, and the PvP focus, then I think they have identified a void for some people who otherwise just want something more that's not exactly as hardcore as ABI or Tarkov. And if Bungie is able to successfully do that, then I think Marathon is going to have a very nice time in the live service market. But ladies and gentlemen, that is my optimistic, can't wait for Marathon Server Slam launch and the rest of Escalation Arc Raiders updates take on these next 2 weeks we have here coming up. Of course, as Marathon drops, I think I'm going to be focusing that game just a bit more, just in terms of how much I expect there to be progression wise. But either way, I am going to balance between Marathon and Arc Raiders, enjoy both games and cover both games, hopefully equally. Just depends on where this all goes. But thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, subscribe with the bell so that you never miss another one if you enjoy this kind of content, and I will catch you guys next time.